Hey everyone, so I'm not going to do any plugs or anything because it's about 6:11 p.m. right now, and I am potentially basically, I would say, 20 minutes or so away from things kind of getting back to, I guess you could say, sort of normal or something like that, for the evening. I mean, you know how it is, basically for those of you that have followed me for 18 years, going on 18 years this June. Basically, I have to be more careful about how I, produce content, when it's not just, me, when it's not just me, in the house and everything. So, yeah, I'm not going to do any plugs. The only ones I might do anyway are the ones that are not listed. For example, if you want to find me artistically, creatively outside of the podcast and YouTubes and all that, the stuff that's listed, the places you can find me that's not listed are DeviantArt at BVW1979, for Affinity at BW1979, and InkBunny.net at BW Rosas. I also will let you know that I do have some new content on the podcast, on the BW Rosas Discussions podcast, some new content on Rumble, my other alternate video outlet, and I do have several new videos on TikTok, which is also going to be another video outlet for me in the future. Primarily because everybody's on TikTok now, so why not try to utilize that, take advantage of that situation? So you'll probably see a lot more content on there that you also see here on YouTube. So you have it on two areas, and if you can follow me on TikTok, get that growing. It helps me out tremendously as well, along with the podcast as well. If you can follow me on both areas, it helps me out tremendously. Also, I will say that the live chat is going to be open, and along with the live chat, super chats are open. So if you want to get the super chats on in along with your thoughts, go ahead and do so. And also, the comment section will be open on both occasions, live video premiere and afterwards. And the super thanks is a little heart with dollar sign in the middle. That little icon will be available to click on to help donate if you don't get here in time for the live video premiere and to do a super chat. Also, affiliated stores will be listed as well, so check those out if you can. But with those little plugs, not all of them, but those little minor plugs put in there, let's get on to the topic at hand, shall we? Okay, so one of my videos that I put up, the brief one that I did, the little 12-minute, 46-second one on, the Minerva Mink episodes, and, the fact that they're 25, basically about 24, 25 episodes apart from each other, according to the episode listing on Tubi, if you will. Somebody commented on, not those videos, but they commented on a video I did a year or so ago. It was like a compilation video and everything, where basically um, it was called basically, if I can find it here, it was basically the video of Olive Oil, Babs Buddy, Dot Warner, and Minerva Mink melting away and loving it. Now, the reason it was commented on there by a YouTube user and follower, fellow YouTube content creator, follower, if you will, Wolf dash I8W, Wolf dash I8W, about 17 hours ago, at the time of this recording. The reason it was commented, on by them is because the one thing I mentioned in the little video where I talked about, the Minerva episodes or the Minerva cartoons in the episodes they're a part of being 25 episodes, 24 to 25 episodes apart, episode 29 to episode 54, is one of the things I mentioned was the Lustful.melt gag that she does, because one of the more popular character traits, and even Gemini, even Gemini agreed with this. Even Gemini agreed with this, that Minerva basically became known as the only character, and this was her character trait, if you will, became known as the only character for this trait in Animaniacs, and that is the fact that she's the only one to do the Lustful.melt gag twice. And basically, she did for the first time in Moon over Minerva, and then for the second time in what was supposed to be her actual first cartoon, Meet Minerva. And she did it differently on both occasions. She did it differently on both occasions. Excuse me. In Moon over Minerva, she did it, if you will, and it got to a point, as I've talked about before, to where Wilford, in his werewolf form, Fabio werewolf form, if you will, had to pick her up like a wet towel and wring her out. He had to legitimately, wring her out, and basically wring her out and just dry her out, if you will, to get her back to normal. Well, when she did it in Meet Minerva, she melted through her best friend's cousin's arms, and she literally melted in half. Like one half went this way, one half went the other way, but they all met down, into one puddle. And then she, instead of just remaining there and having to be reformed by somebody else, by the cousin, instead she ended up popping and reforming herself into like an obnoxious boat horn and everything, if you will. So it was because of that that she became known as the only character in Animaniacs the OG Animaniacs, by the way, to do that trait twice. I mean, we saw Dot do it in Space Probe and everything, and that was about it. We saw the Warner siblings do it, but that was out of boredom in the Animators Alley segments they were part of. So basically, Minerva was the only one, like I said, out of all the characters, out of all the male and female characters, to do it twice. And do it because it's became and do it because it was a part of her character trait, if you will, it's part of her character trait. So that was kind of nice. That was kind of nice to kind of get, I guess you could say, through even Gemini, Google's Gemini. That was nice to kind of get affirmity, if you will, as that being part of her trait and everything. But the reason a wolf dash I8W commented on this video, where it's basically segments of all the female characters: Olive Oil from Popeye, Babs from Tiny Toons, Dot Warner and Minerva from Animaniacs, OG Animaniacs, that is OG, melting away and loving it, is because when I talked about the Lustful.melt gag, in the Minerva video, and where you can find it when you do the little scroll bar and everything, search bar, for the on the episode to try to find a specific scene. Basically, I mentioned that you could do that, and you will automatically, because what it does is it has like the image, it has like the scenes, go that you can go through. You could see exactly what scenes in the episodes are appearing, and by seeing it through the scrolling, you can pretty much basically find what you're looking for, and then click on it, or at least close to it. But the reason, like I said, they commented on this video is because they had no idea, basically, what the Lustful.melt gag was. As a matter of fact, this is what the comment says, and this is from, like I said, fellow YouTube content creator Wolf-I8W. This is what they said 17 hours ago. This is what they said, and I quote: I saw your latest video with you mentioning the Minerva Mink Lustful.melt gag debut, but had no idea what it was until now. Thank you for providing footage and showing what a legend her character was, apparently even with such a small addition. And obviously they are, with their name being Wolf, having the word Wolf in their name, or their YouTube username, obviously they are a fan, of the character. But again, for them to comment on that and everything, and not, on the video I did recently talking about, the episodes and how far they're in between of each other, but basically commenting on the compilation video I put together, for them to comment that, and basically saying that they didn't even know about that little detail, on its own, to where basically she is the only character, like I said, even Gemini has backed this up, the only character in Animaniacs to do that to do that twice, to do that gag twice, because again, this is what Wolf-IAW said, and I quote: "I saw your latest video with you mentioning the Minerva Mink Lustful.melt gag debut, but had no idea what it was until now. Thank you for providing footage and showing what a legend her character was, apparently even with such a small addition." And for them to bring that up, like I said, that's a huge compliment for a content creator like me, because I read that and I'm like, wow, this is that's kind of that's something that you learn, that's something that basically you don't know about and you learn about, not every day, and that's a good thing, because obviously, a lot of people that are even fans of certain characters, like a Minerva Mink or whoever, sometimes there's always going to be that small detail. There's always going to be that small detail that they may not notice. They may not, take into consideration of, okay, we love this character, we're a fan of this character, and everything, but is there more to the character besides what we already know? And when somebody brings up, hey, did you know about this? Did you know about that? And everything, I think honestly that's when it, really dawns on them, like, no, I didn't know. No, I didn't, realize that that was, part of her character the entire time. And when it comes to a character like Minerva, it is. It is part of her character because, you know, because let's be honest. Let's be honest, okay? When you look at Tiny Toon Adventures, the OG Tiny Toons, okay, when you look at that and everything, we know that the characters did the Lustful.melt gag there too, right? We know Buster did it, we know Plucky did it, and we know Babs did it. And Babs did it basically in a very unique way, multiple times as well. She did it, the first time she did it, it was more of a admirable. It was more like an admirable kind of Lustful.melt gag, if you will, in Europe in 30 Minutes, after she saw the royal couple, or at least a parody of the royal couple, if you will. And then she said her line of "our royalty," and then she literally melts into a pink puddle that gets ran through, by her friends, and then she reforms after they run through her, and then she follows them afterwards. And then she does it again in what is essentially considered by some to be the finale to Tiny Toon Adventures, That's Wonderful Tiny Toon Christmas, after Buster kisses her on the lips as his Christmas gift to her, and then she literally melts right through her clothes, with just her clothes and her eyes basically falling on top of her melted form. And then, like I said, we know that Plucky's done it. We knew he did it in the Pluck Tracy cartoon, which is paying homage to the Duck, the Duck Tracy cartoon that Daffy Duck did back in the 40s and 30s and stuff. We know he did it in the Acme Bowl and everything. So we know he's done it. We know Buster's done it and all that. It was basically kind of interesting, I will say, to see this gag return, in Tiny Toon Adventures, and then continue to be utilized, in the, I guess you could say, spin-off series Animaniacs. So it was nice to, like I said, see, this gag come back. But a lot of people are always wondering, I'm sure, like, what is so unique about the Lustful.melt gag? Like, why do people talk about it, if you will? Why are they fans about it? Why is it considered a trope and a gag? It's because, as I've talked about before, and I've talked about it several times on this channel, over the near 18 years, which, by the way, 18 years will be marked up will be celebrated this June, I should say. But anyway, basically, what the Lustful.melt gag is, the uniqueness about it is it's a visual representation, of how somebody feels. Like, one thing I always mention when I talk about it and all that is I go back to an episode of Major Dad. I don't know what service Major Dad is on right now. It was a comedy. It was like a military comedy, family sitcom or something like that, of a retired military dad and all that. Well, anyway, there's this scene where him and his wife are on some kind of like second honeymoon, and they're lying in bed together, and they're making out. They're not, making love or anything like that. They're still fully clothed and everything, but they're making out. And the wife says that she's melting and all that. Now, live action wise, you're not going to see her literally, start becoming liquefied and everything. No. But if it was animated, you might start seeing that. I mean, as well. You might start seeing that. Maybe if it was animated. Not saying that's the case, but hey, animation at that time, depending on the studio, you might see it. Who knows? Who knows? But anyway, anyway though, that's what the Lustful.melt gag is. It is a visual representation, if you will. It is a visual representation of how the character feels. Even if it's an admirable feeling, it's going to be utilized, like with Babs, in Europe in 30 Minutes in the OG Tiny Toons. Excuse me, that's how it can be utilized as well. But it's been a gag that's been around for the past, God, what? Man, 60, not 60, but it's been around for the past 80 years, almost since the beginning of animation itself, almost. I'm kind of surprised that when the Betty Boop cartoons came out, including even the early anthropomorphic Betty Boop, I'm kind of surprised that we never really got that, in her cartoons with her or her friends, I'm surprised we never really got that, at all. I'm surprised, and also I'm surprised we didn't get it in some of the Universal Oswald, the Lucky Rabbit cartoons, that iWorks did for Universal after he left Disney. We had things that were close, like there was the one cartoon where something fell on top of Bosco, or not Bosco, but Oswald, fell on top of Oswald and everything. And it literally broke him into little Oswald that just ran all over the place, to end the cartoon and everything. So, I'm surprised that, back then when it was known as Rubber Hose Animation, we never saw anything like that, whatsoever. We never saw anything like that whatsoever. And we wouldn't see anything like it, as far as I know, because the earliest, the earliest example, in my personal opinion, and from my own personal experience, was Swooner Crooner. And that was like a 1944, 1943, cartoon where Porky Pig was, who by the way turns 91. His character turns 91 today, believe it or not. But Porky Pig was running this farm, this egg farm and everything, with all these chickens that were laying eggs for him, and it was sort of like kind of like a play on the whole, it was like a whole kind of play on, Bond's Little War kind of thing, or something like that. It was something like related to that, even though I think it came out a year or so later. But anyway, to get to the point, there's these two characters that show up. This rooster-like character, if you will, Frank Sinatra-like rooster character, and then this Bing Cosby-like character. Okay, Bing Cosby, pigeon-like character or whatever. And basically, when the rooster Frank Sinatra character shows up, of course it's a play on Frank Sinatra and how women would react to him, right? Same with Bing. But anyway, what happened is when he's singing like another song, he's starting to sing another song. We see all the hens, and if you will, all the chickens, basically start to I guess you could say do wild type reactions and everything, that the female characters would make, or would do, I should say, when it comes to these like Frank Sinatra like parodies and satires of Frank Sinatra himself. So anyway, this is one hen, if you will, this one black and brown hen and everything, and it's the color of her feathers, nothing else. Color of her feathers, nothing else. Let's make that straight. But she literally says Frankie, and then literally melts down into basically a wavering puddle of a wavering black puddle with her frill, remaining on the top. Literally, she melts into basically almost like a fried egg, like a puddle again with her like little frills on the top. And she remains that way, believe it or not, until the Bing Cosby bird character, pigeon character comes up, starts singing, and only then does she pop back up to normal and everything. It's kind of like basically they took the scene and they just put it into rewind and everything and add a little animation there, or additional animation, if you will, to kind of give it originality, to make it a little bit different. But still, she literally melts into a puddle, kind of egg, kind of like fried egg like puddle, if you will, with a frill on top, to the point that if the Bing Cosby character, and I joke about this with Minerva and her melting in Moon over Minerva, that basically had the Bing Cosby character not come around, she would have, this hen would have basically remained as a melted puddle of goo on the ground. And we can only assume how long she remained that way because the way they were playing it out, in the cartoon, that it was basically days before this, if it was basically hours, if not days before this Bing Cosby bird, if you will, this Bing Cosby like bird showed up to help Porky out and everything with the hens. It was about, and I'm just closing the blinds to my back door here. I do apologize if you heard anything. If I went silent there, I do apologize. But basically, it felt like the way it was built, built up. It felt like it could have been like hours, if not days, before Porky got some help from the Bing Cosby character, if you know what I mean. But yeah, basically, it's been around for quite some time. And again, it wasn't just that either. They even had it, in other cartoons. The one that really got me into the gag, of course, and I've made this well known, is the 1956 Popeye cartoon, Parlez Vooz Woo. Parlez Vooz Woo, where at the end of the cartoon, Olive literally melts into a running puddle, a running, flowing puddle of butter, that goes down, that is flowing down basically the floor. She literally melts into a flowing, puddle of butter that flows down the floor, and all you see on the puddle is just her eyes and her smile. And then what's interesting about it is as she's running down, flowing down the floor, as I've mentioned before many times, you see like these little dry spots start to show up on her puddle, and there's one dry spot that literally goes right near her eye, if not on her eye, and everything, and then that's how it ends. With Popeye laughing in the background too, and everything. And again, it's interesting to see this gag, or to see that gag put into a Popeye short like that. But it's not the first time Popeye's done those kind of things. Another gag that I'm a fan of is the 1, 2, 3 drowning comedy gag, which I've talked about that as well. To where basically that was based on a real life situation, and studios decided to run with it. They decided to run with it and turn it into some kind of a gag, if you will, for animation. But anyway, there's that gag where Olive is literally drowning in the ocean, and all of a sudden her fingers goes, her hand comes up, and she goes one, and then pulls it back down, and then brings it up back two, and then brings it back down, and goes for three, and then basically three means that's it, right? Before she's saved by the Bluto like lifeguard, if you will. But anyway, to get back on point though, they've also done the Lustful.melt gag with her, even before, Paulette's Woos Woos. But the way they did it was in the 1940, one of the 1940s shorts called Fistic Mystic. And what happened here is literally, long story short, the Bluto's character, who's kind of like a wizard, Shazam, whatever kind of like wizard, kisses her and everything, and she literally goes flat. She literally goes limp in his arms, or yeah, she goes limp, but she basically falls through his arms and goes flat, like she got ran over by a piano, on top of the stairs. Like you see those cartoons where something like a piano or something heavy is coming down the stairs, towards the character, and the character's trying to run away. And then next thing you see in the next scene is the object, coming down the stairs, but you don't see the character, and instead you see the character coming afterwards, and they're just rolling down the stairs and everything, kind of like flattened and everything. Well, that's kind of like what Olive's body did. She basically went limp, went through Bluto's arms, and she turned yellow as she was going down the stairs, saying, I'm just like butter in his hands. And it's like, okay, you did a lustful milk egg there, or did you? Because it didn't. It really wasn't lustful milk because she basically popped back up to normal and everything after that. Some could say that that could be counted as lustful milk because we even see it in one of the earlier cartoon shorts or something that kind of did something similar to Sunakuna, but with cats. And there's this like little kitten character, a little cat character that literally the main character, this old man cat, I can't think of his name, basically has to throw her out the bedroom door, and she goes right down the stairs, and she literally goes limp. She goes liquidy down the stairs and everything. Just like I said, if she gotten flattened by, like she had just gotten flattened by something, if you will, So some could say that that could count as, as part of it, and maybe it might. I'm not saying that's true. I'm not saying that's true or anything. But anyway, long story short, to get to the point, to get to the point, like I said, the first time I saw the gag and became a fan of it was in the 1956 Popeye Paulet's Woo's Woo's short. And what was unique about that short was the fact that everything that was being spoken of and everything would happen. Would happen to Olive. Like at the beginning, the international on television tells the girls that their eyes are like limpid pool eyes, and her eyes literally become limpid pools and everything. Or basically, when she gets kissed by Popeye, before he takes the spinach, she turns into a block of ice and stuff like that. So it's definitely a Popeye short to where when you say something's going to happen and everything, it definitely happens. It really does. It's like it's more over exaggerated, more cartoony than I think any other short that they had done. Now, I had not seen the gag be utilized after that until we got to Tiny Toons. Until we got to Tiny Toons, until we got to Animaniacs, and only then did I start seeing it being utilized again. Like I said, saw it utilized, from the first episode of Tiny Toons Looney Beginning to the admirable use of it, by Babs in Europe in 30 Minutes, to Plucky doing it in the Acme Bowl and Pluck Tracy, to Buster doing it in the Acme Bowl thanks to Babs. Babs doing it thanks to being kissed by Buster and all that. So it's been done before. It was done. So it was done before many times before we saw it in Animaniacs. But when they did it in Animaniacs, again, the only characters that truly did the Lustful Milk Egg because of because of attraction and everything, that, being a Mord, being just, head over heels and all that for a character. The only ones we saw, do it were Dot Warner, in Space Probe, where she gets her mind read and she sees her thoughts on the screen, and she comes up with this one thought, and it causes her to literally melt in the seat where she has this helmet thing, this mind reading helmet on. It causes the Dot to literally melt in the seat and everything to the point that she's nothing but a puddle on the seat with her ears and everything just flop down on top of her melted form, and then the helmet just comes crashing down on top of her form, and then the aliens have to look and go like, did we kill her and all that? Like what? Before she pops back to normal and everything. So she's the only one that's done it. And then Minerva, of course, did it later on in Moon over Minerva and then Meet Minerva. And by doing it in both of her solo cartoons, again, she became the only character in Animaniacs. Excuse me, she became the only character in Animaniacs to do it the most. She's the only character that did it the most, in that cartoon and everything. I don't think they ever carried it on to the Pinky and the Brain spinoff or the Pinky and the Brain and Elmira spinoff. I don't think they carried it on there. I don't think they carried it on to Freakazoid or anything like that. Not that I know of. Let me know if they did. But they did carry it on sometimes in other cartoons, even though it was off screen. Like, they did it in the Droopy Master Detective cartoon, where, he had a series of not just his own cartoons, but, some accompany cartoon shorts and all that. They did it there. Um, and they did it in other cartoons afterwards as well. That I think they did it in Rocco's Modern Life for a bit. So they've done it. A lot of studios have incorporated it. But not not as much. Not as blatantly, I should say, not as much and as blatantly. As it became well known in Tiny Toons and Animaniacs, if you know what I mean. And they would only use it like once, and that's it. Like one time, and that's it, because they want to get over a character's reaction to another, if you know what I mean. For example, there's the what's the short and everything? Well, not the short, but what's the cartoon? But there's this cartoon basically. Matter of fact, let me see if I can find it. On my tablet, on my Fire tablet, if you will. Hold on. Let me see if I can find it here. Because I do have Prime Video on my tablet. Like I'm sure a lot of people have it on theirs if they have a Fire tablet. Um, but there's this one short. I'm gonna bring it up right now if I can find it. Let me see. Not download. Is it downloads? No, I don't think it's downloads. No, it's probably in my account here. Hold on. Yeah, here we are. Here we go. It's on my purchases. So let's see. Filter, content type, TV shows. Here we go. All right. So let's see. Okay, it's called Sidekick Season 2. It's in Sidekick Season 2. This is an episode where this girl called Vanna. I think her name is Vanna, and she literally gets attracted by this new character. This new, I guess you could say, suave character at the psychic school, superhero psychic school. And she literally melts, right in his arm. I wouldn't say in his arms and everything, but she melts to where he's, holding her hand, and she kind of sighs, goes, "Oh," and the next thing you know, she melts down. And she doesn't do a complete melt because basically her body is, her head is still sticking up in the puddle, and her leg is like this way and that. It's basically, I think TV Tropes described it like she melted like wax and everything. I think that's how TV Tropes described it. Like she melted like wax and everything. So that's essentially one of the more modern examples of them using the gag, if you will. It's one of the more modern examples and everything. And then let me see here, make sure I got it all. And then there's another one. Let's see, trying to see here. I know it's in here somewhere. Okay, so another one is Kaplan Flamingo. It's in the short episode in the short called Blindsided, where basically a friend of Kaplan Flamingo, Otto, wants to impress a girl. So Flamingo gives him a voice changer device to basically change his voice to make it more suave, if you will. And so he uses it on Elizabeth, who's a friend of the close friend of theirs, and it literally causes Elizabeth to melt into a puddle to where basically she's flowing across the ground, and her little pigtails are the only things that remain on the puddle, and her pigtails are floating away on the puddle, separate from each other. So. And then another, okay, Groove High. Groove High, basically, that's a series to where you have the live action characters, if you will, of Tom and Zoe, reflecting back and remembering their pastime at high school. And they're kind of like a band, like a boyfriend girlfriend band or something. Anyway, Tom basically in one animated episode, disguises himself as Dom and sweet talks Zoe to the point that Zoe literally melts into a puddle of water at his feet before she reforms. And the only thing on the water puddle she melts into is her closed eyes and everything, and that's it. So yeah, that's another more modern example and everything. And then you have Spliced, which is a cartoon where it's basically it's kind of like a modern day version of Wuzzles, but it's not Wuzzles. And you literally have Patricia melt in her chair when she sees this character called a Waldo and everything. And again, it's happened in a lot of shows. It's happened in the Twisted Tales of Felix the Cat in the episode The Sludge King, the first half of that, the two-parter, when Felix sees Candy Kitty and all that. And he also does it in Love at First Slice after being fondled by Natasha Slinky or whatever. And then it's also done in the Wild World of Tex Avery in the Pal Pooch segment. PP loves Fifi, while Pal Pooch melts after the beautiful Fifi passes by. Although, as TV Trope puts it, the actual melting happens off screen and everything. The puddle he becomes is seen after Fifi leaves and all that. So there's a lot of examples, but like I said, the more notable examples, if you will, are Tiny Toons and Animaniacs with Minerva, with Minerva and Dot in Animaniacs, Minerva more so than any other character in Animaniacs, and basically Babs and Plucky and Buster and Tiny Toons, and I think equally Babs and Plucky. Well, actually all three of them did it equally as well. So I'll just put it that way. But again, the character that um, did the most in Animaniacs, the spin-off show, was Minerva. And what's crazy is her Lustful.melt gag trope is more talked about, I think, than anybody else's, even the Tiny Toon ones and all that. And I think it's because of the fact that basically, I think it's basically because of the fact that she really, the character really leans into it, when she has the reaction and everything, to the point that basically, you just get a kick out of it. And when you put it like in slow mo, if you will, like step by step motion, basically seeing how the scene is, created step by step, you do that you kind of see basically why I think it's so memorable in the eyes of fans, like the Moon over Maneuver one, and even the Melt one, because when you kind of do it like step by step, when you pause it, like if you're watching the DVD and everything, and you pause it and you're going step by step by step, you see exactly how detailed the melting for her probably was more so than any of the other characters that had done it, in the show as well as in, Tiny Toons that preceded the, Animaniacs. So you kind of see it's more detailed. And then, like I said, you have other examples in other shows, which is good, but, those are the more notable ones. The Babs one, the more admirable version of the Lustful Melt in Europe in 30 Minutes for Tiny Toon Adventures for Babs, that's more notable, not just because of the fact that it's one of the early versions of doing the Lustful Milk Egg in the show, and you can see that it is just by, like I say, doing the pause and step by step thing with the DVD. Um, not only is that a good early example, but it's also an early example due to the fact that she remains that way after you have Buster, Plucky, and Hampton run after the royal couple, and they run right through her like she's just a puddle. Well, which she is, which she is. And what's interesting about that is when they run through her, parts of her just, as a puddle, just splash all over the hall, and before she reforms and follows after them. And then with Minerva, what makes her Moon over Minerva one so interesting again is you have Wilford picking her up like a wet towel, or picking her up and wringing her out like a wet towel. And you're seeing little parts of her just go flying all over the place and all that. That's what makes it so interesting to me is the fact that, and I think that's why I'm a fan of it. That basically, with those two examples there from Tiny Toon and Animaniacs with Babs and Minerva, what makes it interesting to me, and I think so funny to me, is literally they have parts of themselves being lost, and everything all over the place, before they get reformed or they reform themselves. So that's kind of cool. That's kind of funny and unique to see, in my opinion, honestly. But yeah, basically, basically the Lustful Milk Egg is definitely something that I wish they would have brought back for Tiny Toon University. They kind of did. I did talk about it. They kind of did bring it back, but it was part of a performance thing with Buster and Babs, who are siblings in University, which a lot of fans did not like and everything. But I was hoping maybe they bring it back for some of the characters, like maybe their interpretation of Fifi or their interpretation of Shirley. Maybe do it for Babs and have her some kind of admired and attracted to somebody else and everything. You know, bring it back. You know, at least in that capacity. But they didn't. You know, they never did. You know, I was hoping they'd do that. I was hoping they'd do it in the Hulu reboot of Animaniacs, and you know the rebooted version that came out recently. You know, but they never did it there, which was a shocker. You think it's Animaniacs, you would do it, but they didn't. You know, so I was kind of surprised by that. I was kind of surprised too that you have the Looney Tunes show that came out that is also on Tubi now, and you have this Kristen Wiig voiced version of Lola Bunny. There's more, it's more very Looney Toony version of Lola, who even I think is pretty much is very similar in tone with the Wabbit version of Lola. You know, you look at that and you're like, okay, why couldn't you use the gag on her there? You know, why couldn't you use the gag on her there? I don't get it. You have her all lovey-dovey with bugs and all that. Why not have her do it there? Or why not have her do it when she's trying to help Daffy win over Tina Russo, if you will? And you know, he's reading off the stuff that she's wrote for him, and she's falling for it herself. You know, why not have her do it there? It's like you had the opportunity and they didn't do it. So to me, there were opportunities. I think they could have brought the gag back, but they didn't. And I think if they would have, it would have made certain scenes in some of these shows, a lot more funny and a lot more eventful. In my opinion, my honest opinion. But again, they never did. They never did. So yeah, it was kind of like to me a missed opportunity, in my honest opinion, a missed opportunity. And then of course you have Jellystone. You have Jellystone that just came out, very popular series, very good series, and you don't use it there. I mean, you got you got a more Looney Tune version, if you will, of Cindy Bear, a more Looney Tune version of Cindy Bear. For goodness sakes, you couldn't do it with her. I mean, come on, seriously. I mean, opportunity is there, and you couldn't do it with her. I don't understand that. I don't understand that. But anyway, though, outside of that, basically, there are reasons I became fans of it, and why, some interpretations of it just stick out more than others, and why, with that one video that Wolf-I8B, here on YouTube, fellow content creator, this is one of the reasons, why they, commented on it, because when I mentioned it, it's one of those moments, with Minerva that I'm assuming they overlooked. My opinion, I'm assuming they overlooked and everything, and didn't realize was a part of her character trait until they went and saw, this compilation video and everything, and then realized, oh, it is part of her character trait. That's cool. That makes her even better than she is. And that's cool to hear, that it basically, in their minds, it makes her more of a legendary character than she already was looked at, because she's always been known for her zany, wild outtakes, even in the comic books, if you will. And she even did the Lustful.melt in a comic book issue as well. Wasn't a complete meltdown, but basically it's like she's trying to buy something, and then the guy that's gonna check her out, who's actually getting ready to leave, she sees him, and she just goes into Wild Take City, and she literally melts, onto the ground, and all you see is her head sticking out, going, "Ooh wee, is it hot in here? Or is it just you?" You know. If you add that to the equation, if you add that to her, gag, to her not gag, but to her resume, that's 3 times, 2 times in the cartoon and once in the comic. So yeah, basically it is, a character trait of hers that, defines who she is. It's one of those character traits that, as silly as it may seem, it's what defines who she is. And that's good to see. And it's great to see a fellow fan, realize, come to realize, thanks to, people like me, just, giving information out there, just to, like how to find episodes, how far in between the episodes are and everything on outlets like Tubi. It's nice to see them kind of, appreciate the advice, that people like me and others out there give. I mean, for me, I give a shout out to people like Mad Little Pixel and John Hancock and everything, and those out there, Re-Res and everything, that talk about things like the Super Retrocade, and with Pixel and Hancock and them, I give a shout out to them because they're to the people, to the YouTube content creators like myself, that let us know that hey, we could add ROMs, more ROMs, more games to the Super Retrocade than what's already pre-installed in there. So I give a shout out to them because that's advice they gave that I followed through on. I didn't even know about, and I'm sure nobody else knew about. So yeah, I'm always humbled and everything when somebody says, yeah, I didn't know about this, and so I have to thank you for letting me know about that because it makes something or some one that I like, character or whatever, a more important, more legendary, in my eyes than what they already were. So it's good. So it's very humbling to to get that compliment. It really is. But yeah, that is a trait of hers that sometimes I think people may overlook and not realize. Oh, wait a minute, in the cartoon or two solo cartoons. Wait a minute, she did it twice. I didn't even know about that. And then if you and that was my phone going off. I do apologize. But anyway, that was my phone notifications going off. I do apologize. But and then of course, like I said, you add in what her doing it in the comic that one time. It's like basically it becomes a defining trait. It becomes a defining trait, if you will, of what makes her character so popular and beloved. And again, I'm kind of surprised that we never saw this gag show up again in any of the modern retakes of Animaniacs or Tiny Toons. You know, maybe we might see it again down the line, but we'll see. I'm hoping they give it an opportunity. I'm hoping they give it an opportunity to shine and be something that it needs to be. When it comes to any kind of show they got down the road. I mean, I look at Fiona and Cake. I look at both seasons, and I look at Cake. She has this ability to become all these things now, just like Jake did in Adventure Time. You can't tell me you can't use the Lustful.melt gag on her. You're potentially starting a relationship with her and this worm guy, if you will. Why not use it on her, potentially in the next season if there is another season? I'm just saying. I'm just saying. But yeah, overall, it's nice to, it's nice to be humbled and complimented on about the fact that you pointed out something that some people may overlook and all that, even if it is kind of silly and, some might think insignificant and not important, but in some fans' eyes, it is. It is important, especially when they come to realize, based off what they're, watching, like with this this compilation here that I created, they're realizing, oh, it was, oh, she did it twice. I didn't even know that. So yeah, it's nice to get humbled with that and complimented and thanked for the the acknowledgement and the advice and everything and the little trivia that people may not be aware of, if you will, when it comes to characters like that. But anyway, though, I just wanted to come on here and do this and talk about it. I know it went longer than I expected, but yeah, I just wanted to talk about it and everything. Also, give a little bit of a history of what the gag is about and how I became a fan as well. But let me know what your thoughts are, guys, down below in the comment section. If not already in the live chat, if you haven't already. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section on this. And until next time, guys, like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, and share the video. And also, click on the links in the description to find my content elsewhere outside of YouTube and to support me outside of YouTube as well. And super thanks will be open as soon as this video premiere is done. But guys, let me know what your thoughts are on what I had to say, and shout out to Wolf dash I8 Wolf dash one Wolf dash I8W. Excuse me. Well, shout out to them. Really appreciate the compliment, guys, and everything on that. Really appreciate the compliment, and I'm glad to help. Glad to help you out there. But let me know if any of you, agree with what I had to say here. Let me know if any of you kind of noticed that as well with, characters like Minerva when it comes to, gags like this and all that. Let me know if it kind of surprised you that, oh, wait a minute, she has done it more times than any other character. Let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And until next time, I am out. Take care. God bless. Peace.